Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Padraig O'Hora. Padraig is a Mayo and Ballina footballer who uses his social media platforms to talk about important topics such as mental health, youth justice and inclusion/diversity. Padraig, we have so many things we can potentially talk about in today's podcast, so welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it. Yeah, we've any amount of avenues to go down, so we'll see where we end up.
Mate, I want to start with mental health, and this is something that I love your platform for. I came across it through Lee Keegan, and as a Galway man, obviously, I'm very aware of you from seeing you play with Ballina and seeing you play with Mayo for years. But you're doing such important things with your social media and making it a very important platform. But I want to start with mental health and talk about why that's important to you and what kind of got you talking about it publicly.
It's not just one stream, I suppose. I work with Mayo Mental Health Association here in Mayo. They do incredible work, absolutely incredible work. Have a really, really small team that is just really, really effective, and it's a huge benefit to Mayo. So very grateful to be part of that. And I spend a lot of time kind of going in and out of schools and different groups and kind of just talking about mental health, trying to open up the conversation. My point of reference would be, I suppose, to discuss kind of resilience and different abilities and about trying to take care of yourself and getting through the tough times. So why it's important to me, it's important because it's important to everybody. I lost a friend to suicide when he was 17. There's been plenty of different kind of things that have popped off over the last 10 years in people's lives. We've lost plenty of people around here. A lot of people have suffered. I think that's in every town, every county in the country. So it's always been kind of there, something like if you could make a slight change, if you could help them statistics, if you could help one or two people during the course of your life, wouldn't it be a great thing? So it was always a bit of a passion there. And I suppose now that I'm kind of afforded a bit of a platform through football, I sat down and thought about how to utilise it best, to actually make a genuine change, genuine impact. So mental health and, like you said, inclusion is a big topic for me too. So I'm just going to try and use that platform, hopefully to try and destigmatise it a little bit, open up the conversation and help a few people along the way.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're doing it. And the reason that I reached out to you initially about this podcast was mental health is something I struggled so much with. Like I was a depressed teen, like was suicidal in my teens, struggled with anxiety in my later life. And it's a topic that's so passionate and close to me. And when I think about you going into schools and somebody, because I would have listened to you, you were playing for Mayo, you were playing county. If someone like you came into a school, it would have impacted me and hit me hard. But that's not what was my path. And again, I'm fortunate for the road that I'm on. But for you to use it and be talking to people, particularly in that age bracket, in that school bracket, where people may not have those resilient skills or tool set or toolkit built yet, and people in their 20s and 30s might not necessarily have that either. Talk to us about the resilience element of dealing with mental health, because I think this is something, when I think about mental health, and something I wish I knew back when I was struggling, that I know now, that if you build up mental resilience, it can really help you address your mental health, whether that's depression or environmental depression in my case, or anxiety. Talk to us about the importance of building up that resilience mentally.
Yeah, I think it's a vital element to life and something that we should all develop. But paradoxically, it's kind of like the hard side of it is to build it up, you tend to have to go through them struggles. It's a learned, it's an experience, it's a knowledge. It's very difficult. I can go into the schools and I can sit down in front of a Leaving Cert class and I can explain my journey of resilience, or, what the main parts of resilience look like, or why it's so important. But it's very, very difficult to develop that skill without training it or being exposed to it. So that's everybody wants to be defined as resilient. Everybody wants to be known as resilient, but very, very few people want to expose themselves to the things you probably need to be to develop resilience. So for me, I wouldn't say the most difficult childhood, but I definitely didn't have the easiest one. I had my own unique experience that maybe someday I'll speak about, but that helped me develop resilience. I grew up without a dad. My mother was brilliant, but I grew up without a dad. As the oldest child in the house, then probably grew up a little bit tougher. Felt like you had to, carve your own way, stand strong. And a lot of those experiences would have helped me develop resilience. I think sport is another huge thing, is winning and losing. And that at a team level, but also at a personal level. I think you see huge differences in people that would have boxed or done any, individual sport, because it's a unique experience. You win on your own, you lose on your own, you're challenged to get out of bed and train hard without anybody looking at you or blowing the whistle. So I think all them little bits of experience. So what I kind of try and do is I go in and I speak about those kind of key areas, how to develop resilience. And it's funny, those areas you wouldn't really attach to resilience. They're about self-care, self-awareness, understanding, connecting with other people. Do you know, where we think of resilience, we think of this, stone man, this strong, robust, unpenetrable, unbreakable force, whereas it's very much the opposite. It's somebody that's willing to expose themselves to risk, challenge, and face failure.
One of the biggest things, and you said it there, that it feels like a paradox, although it's not, that when you're struggling with mental health and you have anxiety and you're trying to build up this resilience, you have this kind of stoic, stone-edged, I can deal with this, the version of what you think resiliency is, where in fact resilience, in my opinion, similar to what you said, is the ability to say, I'm not okay, I need help, I'm struggling with this. And there's a difficulty that comes with that I think when you're speaking about mental health, I know Lee was speaking about it recently. The two of you had kind of a video that was promoting for Movember. This is going out in January, so it'll be very top of mind because of, seasonal affective disorder, SAD, etc. People get very low during this time of year. But I'm curious, because of the age bracket, and I think this goes to people in their 20s, in their 30s, even to a degree, particularly men. I think women, from my experience, tend to be better with this, saying I have a problem talking about things. Men tend to be very stoic and keep it to themselves. Do you encourage those teenagers and school-age children, probably similar to people in their 20s and where you're at now, where I'm at in my 30s, to speak about things if they're struggling?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I would never have. Not a hope, not for love nor money, no matter how bad off I was. And I was fortunate enough that I wasn't too bad in my teens. I was just blindly leading my life, thankfully. But if you are, certainly, I think we do have this. I think it is cultural too. I think Irish people are even a little bit worse again than most. We're very rigid in that thinking. Men need to be men is the kind of, and I grew up with that too. Men need to be tough. Men need to, stand on your own 2 feet. Don't give out. Don't complain. But it's clearly the wrong way. All the science says it's wrong. Everything we see, anxiety and depression gone through the roof, be that because of social media or whatever. Life has changed. It's a different world. And I think the teenagers growing up now have so many other factors to deal with. Like for you and I, Brian, I think, we went to school, we went out and met our mates. We didn't really concern ourselves with what was going on anywhere else bar what was directly in front of us, because that's all we seen. We didn't see what everybody was doing in the town across or up in Dublin or what they're doing on the weekend, because we didn't have access to it. We just seen what we were doing. And I think it was a far easier style of life, and I'm grateful for that too. But now young people are connected all day, every day, through gaming, through social media, through everything and anything, that little square thing in our pocket that nobody can put down, myself included. So I think them challenges are obviously causing these anxieties and depressions to increase. And I think anybody that's suffering from that or struggling with it needs to reach out, because at least the services are kind of there now. We are here, there are supports available if you're willing to reach out.
I love that. And I think having a conversation like this, and I would I put us both into this bracket, quite manly men. You're a hard ass back playing for Ballina and Mayo who takes hits and hits people. I'm quite a muscular, in shape fitness guy. And we're both talking about the importance of reaching out and speaking if you're feeling low. I remember I went to a therapist when I was 16 and I was like, fuck this, I'm not talking to him. And I just sat there for the hour, arms folded, going, I'm not talking to you. Who are you? Where I think if I was 16 or 17 now, hearing you, Padraig, speaking about it, you'd be a lot more open to potentially working through those struggles. So these conversations, I think, are really important from your experience, because I work with some teenagers, but in the strength and conditioning, sports nutrition capacity, but it's mostly people in their 20s and their 30s, body composition, sports performance, and anxiety and depression is still a problem based on all the things you've mentioned, the comparison syndrome, the phone in the pocket where you're constantly comparing yourself and measuring yourself with other people, where we just didn't have that 15, 20 years ago. From your experience, do you see it's mostly anxiety that people are struggling with? Is it mostly depression, or is it a combination or a 50-50 of both?
I don't know, to be honest with you. It presents so differently. Like the words anxiety and depression are now thrown out the same way as the likes of autism was thrown out. People can now say it because they've heard it, but they don't really know what it is. Do you know, like when you talk about mental health issues, immediately it's anxiety and depression. That's just it, isn't it? You know, and like I don't really think if you go deeper into it and try and really understand, I think everybody's completely different, and anxiety isn't as much a condition or a mental health issue as it is just a response to reality. So like response to your world. And like anxiety isn't all bad. It's not a negative. Anxiety is absolutely fantastic. You know what I mean? It's a response from the body to say maybe sometimes it's shocked or worried or concerned. And I feel that every time I take on something big. You walk into Crow Park, if you're not full of anxiety, then there's something terribly wrong. Do you know, that's what tells you should be there. Even like I've been given opportunities to give some talks, some public speaking, absolutely petrified. Some of them, I really, really absolutely terrified. Anxiety through the roof. Partner can't talk to me for a day or two because I'm just narky. But all of those feelings are good if you can address them and are aware enough to say, these feelings are here for a reason. I'm taking on a challenge that maybe I'm not comfortable with. Maybe I'm not even sure that I'm capable of doing, but I'm going to go ahead and throw myself into it because it's about growth, it's about learning. So when we do talk about anxiety, there is good anxiety too. It's not all, fear.
The danger's in the dose, 100%. I think that acute anxiety and that fear, sometimes people confuse them and relabel them where, you're feeling fearful or anxious. But I normally, similar to you, Padraig, use that as a feedback that this is what I should be doing. It means that I'm growing, I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. It's that chronic anxiety, or I don't know why I'm constantly feeling this. That's when the danger kind of comes into the dose. I'm very curious, because of your sporting achievements, years of playing with Mayo, obviously doing so well with Ballina as well, your club. Do you find that when it comes to your own personal mental health, that sport helps it, or does it hinder it? And this is something that I know you can go in either direction with, because one of the downsides of team sports is you don't bring your problems into the dressing room. You don't talk about things that are upsetting you. But the upside is you're around people, you're connected. So it can be a bit of a catch-22. From your personal experience, playing sport, playing football at such a high level, do you find that with your personal mental health, it's something that helps it or something that hinders it, or is it just purely context dependent?
I can, of course, only speak from personal experience here, and I owe the GAA and sport a huge amount in regards to my own mental health. As a young person, I never really had major troubles, but upon reflection, if it wasn't for my engagement in the club, if it wasn't for certain members, even volunteers, pulling me in when I needed to, when I was gone a bit daft on drink as a teenager, as we all do, and maybe not turn up for training or half thinking of giving it up. So in that aspect, absolutely. And then as a senior player, I value my connection with the club hugely. I value my connection with the community hugely, and the GAA is a big part of that. So like their friendships, their relationships, even though, as you said, you probably don't carry your troubles in, I have had conversations with people about how I'm feeling, how they're feeling, if I can support them. And then obviously because of the role I'm in, people are maybe a bit more open to discussing things with me. And the GAA comes off the pitch too. So we might be running a fundraiser, we might be doing a separate event. And again, it's an opportunity to connect and discuss different things with people. I've had 2 people this year who've opened up to me and talked about little parts of their journey where maybe they were up or they were down. So if it was my call, I think, yeah, absolutely, any sporting club, any community group, anything that gets you engaging with other people, I think it can only be a benefit.
I had, and I know we talked about this on Instagram, Johan Hari was on the podcast, New York Times bestselling author of Lost Connections, and he speaks, and his book was life-changing for me. I literally picked up and moved where I was living. I was living in Galway City at the time. I'd been in London for years, and I moved out to Connemara, closer to where I grew up, off the back of reading his book, that I'm like, oh my God, I feel so disconnected. I need to put myself back into the environment of my GAA club, my family, my friends that I grew up with. And a lot of my even, I won't say struggles, because I was mentally resilient enough in my late 20s at that point, but it was that little marginal gain that made a huge difference to my happiness levels. And I think when you think about connection and GA in sport, it can give you that. And some problems that feel like problems after a training session or after a game just don't seem like problems anymore. There's the movement element, there's the connection element, and I think sport, and it's so important for people who are listening to this with children, teenagers, etc., to put them into something, whether, my daughter's likes ballet or likes gymnastics and plays a bit of soccer. It doesn't really matter what they're into, just that they're in something, whether it's a team sport or a solo sport that they can channel their mind, or art or creativity or something that they enjoy. And I read your article with Buzz.ie, I think it was in September, Padraig, and I loved it when they asked you a question, what's the best thing about playing for Mayo? And that obviously tees up Croke Park, All Ireland's, playing a rival team. But no, you said it's that I can use it to work on other passions. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, like I love playing for Mayo more than probably anybody. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to the next number of years, hopefully still wearing the green red jersey. But like, it is a big, big part of your life. But I suppose even on the big kind of losses, like to think back, we lost in Croke Park, your heart is broken, the world has ended, and then the kids jump on the pitch and they don't know what's happened, they're smiling, waving. I remember talking to James Horan about this, the kids, they just don't care. Lee the same, Kevin, anybody that has a kids, you realise immediately that football isn't the world that we think it is. And of course we're fully committed to it and love it more than probably most things, but it isn't the be all and end all. There's a whole other realm of opportunity and other things that we can do. And because we're afforded, I suppose, the platform through football, people are willing to listen and hear what you have to say, be that good or bad, I don't know, but it gives you opportunity. And my real passions certainly are mental health, certainly our inclusion in regards to the neurodivergent community that I've worked very, very closely with the last 10 years and have been just life-changing for me, in terms of perspective and understanding and human connection. So like, if that's, if I'm afforded an opportunity, I think the best thing to do with that is to try and improve the quality of life and, for those kind of people. So that's the intention anyway. It's great to be given the platform.
Talk to us about the youth diversion projects. I know you were on RT recently with Dahi Doolan, and I think it's Jennifer McNeil. Talk to us about the benefits of that youth diversion project, because I think this is a really important piece of work that you're doing.
That's class. And like it... See, I do a lot of different kind of roles, but they're all in the community. So I've worked in the disability sector, work in mental health sector, and I work with the youth diversion program. For anybody who doesn't know, that's basically 12 to 18-year-olds predominantly that have ended up on the wrong side of the law. They've got arrested for something, they're at risk of going to court, or they've a couple of minor offences. And basically what we do is they come into us, so they have to acknowledge their mistakes first and foremost, and they go through that process. But what we look to do is kind of target their life holistically. What's going right? What's going wrong for you? Do you have a difficult time at home? Is education a problem? Is it your peers? Are you not involved in a club, like we said, or a community group? What do we need to do to afford you the skills and knowledge to maybe live a better quality of life and be a good person, which 99% of these kids are. They've just made a mistake, So, and I made a mistake. I'm sure you did too. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some of us were lucky enough that we maybe had a parent or a friend or a family member that gave us a kick in the arse at the right time, or sent us the right direction, or helped us out, or a teacher even. You'd always think back on a teacher that kept you on the straight and narrow. So like, that's pretty much our role. But I think what's really important is all these areas need to be kind of treated the same. The young people that are getting in a small bit of bother, the neurodivergent community that aren't included fully in the opportunities that they should be afforded, people with mental health issues within the services that need to be taken care of. And the same with anybody suffering from alcoholism or addiction, chronic addiction. All these people need to be treated the same way. And hopefully we're moving in a direction where it's about love, care, compassion, reconnection. I absolutely love Johan Harry's book. It's about connection. And I think that's pretty much what my role is in all of my roles.
How did you get involved in that?
How did I end up involved? I started in mental health services, I suppose. And that was somewhat luck. I had genuine interest in it, had kind of fallen away, made a Hames at college, gone a bit all over the shop, and then a mate of mine was working there, and he kind of, through discussion and kind of a little bit of re-education, got set up and ended up in there. and then absolutely loved it. Still do love it. Still love the community work we do. The mental health opportunity came about, again, through discussions, again, through wanting to kind of get into the school and pass on some of the lessons and experience I had that I would have loved to have had at 15 or 16. And then the youth diversion program, I was a fairly challenged teen, to put it lightly. So it was always a passion of mine that I knew kids that had trouble with addiction or had a difficult upbringing. I know they have potential. I love even the work Philly McMahon does in regards to addiction, because we know that people with addiction problems have infinite potential, huge potential. They're just trapped. So like, I always wanted to support the young people, and I always wanted to do it in Ballina and Mayo, in my own place where I got the support. So I went back to college, sat down with a few youth workers who kind of explained the roles to me. I went back to college and started studying, and the role came up. So it was the role I've always kind of wanted.
Yeah, it seems very much a square peg into a square hole, that it's the thing that you're meant to be doing. That's what you're talking to you now, following you on social media. It screams to me, this is what you're supposed to be doing. I'm curious from a personal standpoint, when I think of you, Padraig, and I'm consuming your social media, I'm having the conversation with you now, you're extremely emotionally intelligent in terms of your ability to know how you're feeling, how others are feeling, that awareness around based on the work that you're in. Is that something that you've always been very naturally good at, or is that a skill that you've developed over the years?
No, I definitely didn't. I have to acknowledge I was a very, very ambitious, selfish person. And like, I'm not trying to put myself down, I'm being honest. As a teenager, I seen only what Padraig O'Hora needed and wanted, and I would have trampled over whoever I needed to get there. And that was my nature. Maybe the way I grew up or whatever, I don't know. But that's the person that I was. And only through, and this is why I always go back to that neurodivergent community, working with the autistic community, changed. Like, without that experience, I would never have ever ended up where I am. And I know that for shadow of doubt. There's no shadow of doubt in that sense, that like, once I got working with different people and understood that perspective was everything, that we all live unique lives, we all see the world completely differently. And if you take your time to really reflect on your own capacity, how you feel, how you approach the world, how you treat other people, and then take a little bit of time to sit into other people's shoes and see how they see the world. How can I be supportive? What do I need to do to connect to that person, to develop a relationship, to help them, to empower them, to support their life? So once that started happening through the work, it completely changed my attitude towards everybody. And I think it did. It definitely allowed me to develop, kind of, as you said, kind of maybe emotional intelligence or understanding of other people.
That nearly echoes a conversation I had. Today is Wednesday. On Monday, I was chatting with Damien Comer, who plays for Galway. He's in Kenya at the minute. We're recording this. And he's out in Kenya with a few of the Mayo lads, a few of just the intercounty lads. And he was saying, oh my God, the perspective that being out here has given me in terms of people traveling 3 miles every day for water, and they're the happiest people he's ever met. And that perspective, I think, and again, I got it similarly when I've traveled to Vietnam, when I ran through the Sahara. You see people who have nothing, and they're so happy and they're so grateful for the things they do have, and it just shifts your perspective completely. But I'm curious, because you've obviously had so much benefit from that perspective shift through working with other people. Damien is an example. I'm an example, where you end up putting yourself somewhere else physically and you see it and you bring it home with you. If there's someone listening to this podcast who's struggling, and I know myself, one of the things I do if I'm feeling any chronic states of anxiety, or I'm feeling a bit low for whatever reason, I kind of go into a gratitude journaling or a perspective journaling, where I'm like, okay, I actually don't have any real problems here. I'm healthy, I'm well. All the people around me that I love more than anything are all healthy and well. Life is good. And I shift that perspective. But for someone who's struggling to do that, and I'm sure this is possibly a tool that you use with some of the people you work with, if you wanted someone to shift their perspective towards something that's either more positive or to a scenario where other people are potentially doing worse, and you just realign where you are now, how would you recommend somebody go from 0 to 1 with that, if they wanted to take some analysis of their own life perspective so that they could just have a slightly more positive mindset? What would you say they should consider doing?
I think it's extremely unique. I'd hate giving generic ideas to people because there are loads of really good stuff. I agree with you in the gratitude. Personally, do mental journaling. Find it really, really beneficial for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for Brian or going to work for Damien or whoever. So I'm very conscious of that. But like, one thing I have found anyway through experience is that gratitude is vital. However, you do find people in a place where it's very, very difficult because they're not answering the questions the same way you are. They might say, okay, things are hard, but my family members are all okay. Maybe they're not. Maybe mum is in hospital sick. Maybe something has happened. So they can't say yes to that. And they actually, the more they look at the gratitude, the more they can start to feel a little bit more hard done by, or that they're falling further down the line. So like a big, powerful kind of play, I suppose, for me is that nothing remains. Dennis, it's been coined a load of different ways, but the way I remember it best is Dennis Cohen. He worked with us. He's from Ballina. He worked with us for a while, but he would always he would always put it, the only thing we know for certain is that we don't know. And it's just that simplicity of nothing remains, everything changes. Everything, we don't know what's coming in the next hour. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Everything can shift. So no matter how bad things are, and that's something I'd always go back to, no matter how bad things are, or sometimes you need to bring yourself down. Sometimes things have gone really, really high and you need to balance yourself out again after a big win or something like that. It's the exact same thing. You know, nothing remains. Everything will balance itself back out. So even if you are in a big lull, things have been going poorly, the sun will shine again, the day will come, your luck will turn, and it will inevitably happen as long as you stick it out, as long as you stay there, as long as you stay in the mix. And Hell Week of all things taught me that, and it was something them lads echoed time and time again. You don't need to be great at anything, you don't need to, just stick it out, just stay there, remain, don't give in, don't concede to your thoughts, just stay there for long enough for the tide to turn, and it will.
How important is it for the people around you to, one of the quotes that I live my life by, it's from Jim Rohn, that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But when it comes to either a combination of mental health, but what you said there, not getting too high on the high, not getting too low on the lows, how important is your immediate circle of people when it comes to your own kind of positive mental health, personally and from what you've seen working with others?
Hugely. And like, you'll see that through the Lost Connections book, you'll hear it everywhere. One of the slides in my talk, and one of them I really lock into, is positive relationships, because they're vital, absolutely vital. You need people in your life that can keep you on the straight and narrow, can bring you up when you need to be brought up, and bring you down sometimes when you need to be brought down. I remember after the All-Ireland final, the semi-final, when we were at Dublin, through the roof, emotion through the roof. Everything was, there was a million messages on the phone, your picture was everywhere, everybody bloody thought you were God's gift, ready to knock you down the next week, no doubt. But at the time, the high was extremely high. And I had good people around me, but one in particular, Ray Goggins, the boss man from Hell Week, he sent me a message a few days later, and it was, settle yourself down. There was no huge pat in the back or applaud. It was more, your job isn't done. You're not finished. So get your emotions, put them back in the box, settle down, and get going again. And I just remember the change mentally for me. At the time I was struggling, and it was like like on the wall, you just flicked a switch, bang. I was back to kind of where I needed to be. And that'll tell you how important them relationships are. But if you want those relationships in life, this was something that was pointed out to me. I thought it was a really good point. The only way you develop them relationships is being a good person yourself, actually being that person for somebody else. It's two-way traffic. Nobody will be there for you unless you're there to support them too. So I think it's a really, really important point, is you'll get what you give out. If you're a negative person and, always giving out and whining and complaining, don't expect to have those people in your life when you need them.
Yeah, I call it the 4 a.m. test. Who will come and pick you up 2 hours from your house at 4 a.m. if you call them because you're stuck somewhere? And there'll be times in your life, unfortunately, I can think of times in my life when I had nobody, where I'm like, I actually have nobody I could call. Whereas now I've got the fortunate position where there's 3, 4, maybe 5 people that if I'm stuck anywhere at 4 a.m. in the morning, they'll come and pick me up, and I would do the same for them. And I think that is a nice little test, that even if you're not happy with the answer, you at least have feedback that you may need to move in a different direction. I'm curious, just because you mentioned the high of that game versus Dublin with the low then that came in the All-Ireland, and I don't mean to bring up old wounds, but I think it's very relevant for people when it comes to not getting too high on the high, not getting too lows on the low. How did you cope then with the loss? Because I would imagine, and I might be wrong, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the high that came from the semi-final win was probably equaled with the low from the final loss. Again, it may be worse, but I'm not sure. But how did you pick yourself back up then so that people know that, yes, bring yourself back down if you're feeling too high, but also be resilient. Things will pass, things will get better. What was your process like, Padraig, for that, for the loss in the All-Ireland final after winning the semi-final?
Yeah, it probably should be that way, but it wasn't. To be brutally honest with you, I'm a terrible unbelievably competitive. Like, I have a 9-year-old here and I struggle to let him to beat me at things. Do you know what I mean? I genuinely would struggle to let him win a penalty shootout out the back garden. It's an issue. But on the same topic, I can take losses quite well. I don't know if it doesn't sound right, but it's true. I find I'm extremely competitive, but after losing a game, I remember after losing the All-Ireland final, I know which one of the Tyrone lads it was, but I went to shake his hand and I said, well done, I hope you enjoy it. And I could see in his eyes, he goes, you've no idea what I've been through this year. You've no idea what I've been through to get here. And I could see it in him, and I was actually genuinely happy for him. Like, I was genuinely happy. At the end of the day, no matter the banging and hating and roaring we'll do at each other and abuse we'll throw at each other, they're lads with a different jersey on from a different part of the country, all wanting to do the same thing. We're all very, very similar in that regard. So I have great time for all of the players, like, and at the club and county level. I can always be happy for them. So even we lost to Westport there recently, the county final, I could still replace my upset with happiness for Lee and for Fionn and for the rest of them very, very easily. So I actually don't struggle with the lows too much at all. I find coming down from a high a lot harder, because it takes a couple of days for it to settle in, and then it's just this big drop. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. I don't think I've even got that under control yet. It's probably something I need to do a good bit of work on, but the lows don't affect me too much. I can be genuinely happy for the opposing team. Probably not the right way to go about it, but it's the way my mind works anyway.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there's psychology to describe that. There's something that happens with racers. Anytime I would do an endurance race or something extreme, you'd have that low. Or when I used to compete in bodybuilding shows, you were so tunnel vision on a focus on a goal, and then you get the high, having achieved it, having got there, and then you get this massive drop in just nearly like a lost feeling, which is very, very common for people. That's why I always tell them when they're setting a goal for themselves, whether it's sport related or body composition related or work related, always have the next goal in mind so that you're working towards the next thing. Again, it doesn't fully translate here because you obviously had the next game that you're working towards, but I think for people who aren't playing in All-Ireland semi-finals, that are just looking to go to keep their mental health on track when they're working towards a goal, always have the next thing in mind so that you don't get that lull. And I'm not surprised, like, you're very emotionally intelligent, Padraig, that to be able to handle those losses. It's so funny. It reminded me straight away. I remember as a teenager, and this is going to sound so bad, but like, I'm a Galway man, but I'm on the Mayo border. I've got Westport on one side and I've got Cong and Ballinrobe on the other side. Literally, my club is right beside Cong. And when we were 16, 17, it was Galway hated Mayo, Mayo hated Galway. And like, we were in school together. And I remember my old man said to me, my dad, and we got a lot closer in recent years. We weren't very close at the time, but I remember a piece of wisdom he gave me. He was like, if you were born 5 miles that way, you'd be supporting Mayo. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a very good point. That actually any negativity, any, on field, off field hate, all of these things. And I think when you think about inclusion and sport and countries and people and religions and everything, if you were born somewhere else, you would think a different way. And straight away, it brings everything into this kind of globalized inclusion that, yes, we're all kind of part of the same thing. And that's just a very roundabout way to bring it back to the inclusion thing that I want to talk about. With inclusion, this is something you talk about, inclusion, diversity, and I know it ties very closely together with the youth justice, with mental health, etc. But talk about why you're particularly passionate about inclusion and diversity. What was the seed that kind of planted that to having this conversation? Because mental health is something people talk about. I love that you're doing it on your platforms, but it comes up a lot. Inclusion and diversity, there's not a lot of athletes talking about that. Talk to us about the importance and kind of where your seed of passion came from first.
So it pretty much through work, to be honest with you. So like that, working in the disability sector, working alongside people day in, day out, I just started, I suppose you're looking, so perspective, we have to look through, if I'm to support you, Brian, I have to look through your eyes, your lens, and see, what does the world look like for Brian? Okay, and what barriers are in the way from? What issues are preventing him enjoying the life he wants? If you were to write out the 5 goals or the 5 things that you wanted to achieve in your life, I need to then look at how to obtain them first and foremost, because they might be doable already, and then if not, why not? What are the issues, what's in the way, what are the barriers these people are facing? And like, the more I suppose I done that through work, the more interested I got, more passionate I got about it, the more angry I would have got at, anger is a great motivation. You're disappointed, you see things going on, you don't think it's acceptable, it's a great motivator. And then the more I seen was the capacity. So I seen people that might have had significant challenges. So to an untrained eye, or to just a general person, right? You're looking at this person and they struggle socially. They might be nonverbal. They might not speak to people. They might have so many social issues that they can't express themselves at all. But I would then see that same person in a different setting where their needs are met, whatever that might be, maybe reduced volume, whatever it is that ticks the box for that person. And then you see them performing or doing an activity that's valuable or important to them, and you see their capacity, and it's limitless. It genuinely is. Some of the people I've worked with are incredible, just absolutely incredible. And you're coming home from this thinking, why are these people not afforded the opportunity? Why are there not more autistic people working in some of the big businesses? Why are they not in politics? Why are they not running policy? Why are they not involved in the big heavy lifting in the country? Because they're incredible people with incredible mindsets, and their intelligence can be through the roof. They just maybe need to be supported in a different way. We need to break down barriers. And then obviously I watch As I Am, are the biggest autistic charity in the country, what they do. Unbelievable. I've met a couple more people through there, different advocates, people running different operations, just absolutely unbelievable. And like, the more I seen of it, the more I wanted to do. We're currently building a sensory park in Ballina. 2 community groups got together, we've raised a fortune, we've got good money, we've got a plan, and please God, it'll be built by 2023. It's been going a while, but the whole community rode in behind that, because they also see that the opportunities aren't afforded to people that have disabilities, and that we need to bridge that gap. So that's where the passion is. I want to try and make small changes for these people so that themselves and their kids can be afforded equal opportunities.
There's a quote, and I think it's by Mother Teresa, but it reminds me so much of you, Padraig, that you find yourself when you lose yourself in the service of others. And it's something I try and apply in my business and in terms of conversations I have and what I do. And I think it's very applicable for you. And some people who are feeling a bit lost and not sure what they should be doing, I'm like, well, find something that makes you jump out of bed every morning, which is clearly what you do. It's clearly what I do, or I at least hope to put across to people. I just have a couple more questions, Padraig. I'm very curious, because of all that you've been through over the years, between playing with Mayo, playing with Ballina, the work you've done, the inclusion, the diversity, the youth justice, the talking about mental health. What's something that you know now that you wish you knew when you started back first? Or if you could go back to your 18, 19, 20-year-old self, what's something that you know now that you wish you had known back then?
So many things. Any amount of things. 1, alcohol doesn't suit you, don't drink. Definitely would have been helpful, but we got there. I don't know, countless bits and pieces, but again, they're through experience. Like, do I wish I knew them then? Probably not. It would have been great, but would I have learned? Your life is your life, and you learn as you go on. But I think that is probably the most important thing, and I see that in a lot of people. And I would have been this person because I'm charismatic, I'm loud, I want people to listen to me, especially as a young person. I didn't listen to others. The big piece of advice, the big thing that's changed me is listening, perspective. taking on other people's opinions, be that through books like you're on about earlier, audiobooks, podcasts, but just generally people, when you're meeting them, when you're talking to them, listen. And like, I have taken on other people's perspective so much more over the last number of years, and it has helped me an untold amount, because I've been able to, you know, take it in, challenge my own beliefs, my own thinking. Like, I've done podcasts 3 or 4 years ago where I would completely disagree with myself. Do you know, completely disagree with myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. Somebody pulls something up that I said a few years ago and say you're completely disagreeing with yourself. Yes, because you've listened to something else, you've heard other people's perspective, and you're developing and growing. So I think of all the bits of pieces, would be listen a little bit more, shut up, take it in, and challenge yourself in your own thoughts, because 9 times out of 10 they're probably skewed or wrong.
God, that's such great advice for everybody listening. I think you should always be challenging your own best loved ideas, that you should be growing because new information comes in, and you don't want to have that closed mindset that this is the way I think, this is who I am. But once you have that open or growth mindset, you're constantly evolving. And I think, as you mentioned there as an example, don't be afraid to do that. I think it's definitely one of the downsides of having an online presence, because people will say, look, Padraig, what you said several years ago. But you need to be, once you have your own kind of self-worth, and you know that, like you said, you're putting the spin on it going, fucking right, I've changed my mind. I'm a different person now. I've learned more. I've had different conversations.
I think the quote is, it's definitely Muhammad Ali, actually. I think I'll get it right there. I think he said, the man that views the world at 50 the same as he did at the age of 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. And it's very much as simple as that, isn't it? Like, if you're not, and we know people like that are so rigid in their thinking, no problem changing, adapting, listening, learning, and, as I said, disagreeing with yourself. It's good.
I love that. I've just got one final question, Padraig, and I've loved this conversation. As I said, I think you're doing fantastic work. In the show notes, I'm going to link everything that we talked about. I'll link your Instagram page. I'll link some of my favorite articles that you've done in terms of interviews. But is there anywhere else you want to send people before we get on to the last question? Any handles, any social media, anywhere in particular you'd like people to connect with you?
No, like, social media is great. I find it so challenging, to be honest. There are so many things I want to put up. There's so many videos I've made and not put up. I delete stuff. I get anxious. I contemplate deleting the account sometimes. I've a very much love-hate relationship with social media. I think it's the hardest thing ever to navigate. But I like to put it down to, at the best of times. The only things I would say, if you're in Mayo, definitely give us a look at Mayo Mental Health Association, be that for yourself, be that for a family member, just to see the information. There's so much information out there. We even have a directory for all the supports and services that you might need, depending on what niche of area you fall into. That's available in Galway through Jigsaw. It's available through just Mental Health Ireland. Those would be the things I think people should link into. We're constantly taking in data. We're watching stupid reels and TikToks and videos of cats. Like, spend 10 or 15 minutes, jump onto Youth Work Ireland or jump onto Mental Health Ireland, and have a look, see what's there. Like, why not just take in a little bit of that content if you get a chance? I think that's probably the only thing I would ask people to do if they get 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think when you think of, and people on this podcast will be familiar with, food and nutrition. I'm like, what you put into your body, you get out. You put in garbage, get garbage. Put in good food, you feel good. But your mental diet is exactly the same. You put in TikTok reels of cats and people arguing, then it's going to impact the way you see the world. And if you start putting some positive things into your mindset and, mental health, especially if you're struggling with that, that'll have a positive input. And I think people who listen to this podcast, well, I hope anyway, are in that bracket, because you're not listening to a podcast like this unless you have that growth mindset and you want to put a positive change in your life, or you want to continue on a positive road that you're already on. Padraig, I just have one final question. As I said, I will link all of the things we talked about in today's podcast in the show notes and in the description on briankeenfitness.com. But I'm curious, and you can go whatever direction you like with this. What's something that you couldn't live without? And whatever that thing is, tell us why it's important to you.
Yeah, you could go any which way about it there. Any amount of things. Like, obviously, first and foremost, it always kills me actually. I always get introduced as a Mayo footballer, no matter where I go, what I do. Monday night there, we were talking about antisocial behaviour. Should have been introduced maybe as a youth justice worker. No, Mayo footballer. But, and I always say this, the first line that comes to me is a father. So like I have a million things going on in my life, a million things that I need and love and are passionate about, but there is nothing more important, more valuable than the kids. So that would have to be it for me, no matter what goes on in this world. And that's the same for most parents, all parents, you'd hope. That's the one thing I couldn't bear without. I was actually just speaking to the principal of the school today, and he said a parent is only as happy as their most unhappy child. And it was a really, really powerful thing he said to me, and I just remember reflecting on it coming out of the school thinking he's bang on. You know, all the torture I caused my mother, I'm starting to feel bad about it now already, how upset I must have made her, but hopefully she's come around the bend. She's all right now. But yeah, that for me there is the kids, their happiness is vital.
I love that. I'm definitely going to adopt that quote and put that into my repertoire, because that's
Well, I'll give it the right quote there. I hate to give it to an ordinary man being a Ballina man, but it was Vincent Duffy, so I'll give him his credit.
Mr. Duffy, appreciate that one.
Fair play, yeah.
Padraig, keep doing what you're doing, mate. As I said, using your platform, and I did introduce you as a Mayo footballer. I get introduced sometimes as an Instagram fitness influencer, and I'm always like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever grabs the attention and the authority, but it works, because I suppose
that's what it's for, isn't it?
It's exactly what it's for, yeah. And I think this podcast is such an important conversation that we've had and opened up that dialogue. And just to give a final call to action for anyone that's struggling, particularly with the mental health side of things, I think talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a counsellor, call a service, do something. Don't sit in that
your GP. Get into your GP. Just get on the phone, get in there, start the journey.
Yeah. That first step is the hardest part. Of somebody that's been down that road, I can say that first step is by far the hardest part, but it does get easier after that. Padraig, keep inspiring, mate. Keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much again for the chat.
You're a gentleman, Brian. Thanks very much, mate.
There you have it, Mayo footballer Padraig O'Hora on mental health, how to not get too high on the highs or too low on the lows in sport and in life, and why you need to speak to someone if you're struggling. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, this is an episode that if you know any family members or friends who are struggling, I think opening up the dialogue, particularly for young men, I think women as well, but particularly for young men, both myself and Padraig being men, that it's important that if you're struggling and that there's nothing that will work if you just keep it to yourself, and potentially can have a very negative downside. So speaking to somebody, sharing it and getting it out there, getting the word out there that it's okay to not be okay, I think is the main take home from this message. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to let me know. Hit me up on Instagram. You can tag Padraig. You can let Padraig know as well. And that's everything from me from this week's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you all next Monday.